Alright, I'm a couple weeks late on this, but recently Solar Opposites dropped its third season on Hulu. I have always been a fan of Solar Opposites, but I think this latest season truly cemented how much I love it. Obviously, the Rick and Morty comparisons are always going to be there, being another Justin Roiland production and having the exact same art style, but I think I appreciate that it's still full of out there sci-fi nonsense without taking itself nearly as seriously as Rick and Morty. At least with the actual Solar Opposites plotlines, because the plotlines that do take themselves pretty seriously are, of course, the Wall subplots. And while Season 3 really reaffirmed how much I love the Solar Opposites themselves, the Wall remains the absolute highlight of the show. Where Seasons 1 and 2 had a few small Wall subplots sprinkled throughout before showcasing one fully Wall-centric epic towards the end of the seasons, Season 3 opted to sprinkle more robust Wall storylines in more episodes, making it feel like it's graduating from the show within the show to nearly a co-headliner alongside the alien family. So today, I want to break down all 3 seasons of Solar Opposites' The Wall, explain what I love so much about it, and why I argue that The Wall might be the best animated series out there right now. Right after I talk about today's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark VPN is a super cool and helpful tool that can protect your information from data thieves and secure your online life. On top of that, Surfshark can help you unlock tons of content on streaming services like Netflix by logging in through a different country. So if you've run out of cartoons to watch on the US's Netflix library, no sweat, try out Australia or Japan. You can find shows like Rick and Morty, Archer, Close Enough, and more. One subscription gives you access to Surfshark on unlimited devices, so you can load it up on your PC, phone, tablet, Mac, you name it. Plus, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's plenty of time to make sure Surfshark is right for you. I've even got a special offer code for you that will get you 83% off and 3 extra months on top of that for free. Just go to the link in the description of this video and enter the promo code Cellos to get this awesome offer. So before we get into the specifics, I want to talk broadly about why I've grown to love The Wall as a Solar Opposites subplot. Solar Opposites is a show that, while it does have its own lore and is starting to introduce more serialized aspects, largely remains a very silly sitcom parody that operates episodically. And I love that about it. But as the show is a more episodic sitcom, it does generally adhere to a status quo. But with the introduction of the Wall subplot, the series is actually able to tell a tangential, serialized storyline that can actually take risks with its characters and narratives. It's an incredible instance of a show having its cake and eating it too. And it's not like they take The Wall for granted either. They have incredible voice talent throughout, with the voices of Andy Daly, Christina Hendricks, Sterling K. Brown, and Alfred freaking Molina. I mean, my god. And while I have often thought, wow, they should just spin The Wall off into its own show entirely, I kind of love the way that it occasionally intersects with the Solar Opposites. The way The Wall was slowly introduced is honestly pretty genius. The very first episode introduces the shrink ray as Yumulak and Jesse use it on a school bully, but it isn't until the very end of the episode that they properly introduce the actual Wall, at least from the outside.
From now on, we only shrink adults. No one cares when some jerk goes missing.
Good night, Mr. Janitor.
This starts as a pretty fun and out there reveal, but I don't think many people had any real idea how far they would go with it. The introduction of the concept is one thing, but episode 2 takes it a whole step further, making the conflict of the subplot about Yumulak's people shrinking habits.
For the last couple months, you've been putting way too many people in the wall.
But it also establishes a lot that would come into play later, like the fact that Jesse feels for the Wall people and gifts them their candy. But this episode actually nonchalantly introduces one of the most important characters in all of The Wall, Tim.
So from now on, I'll make sure that everyone in the Wall deserves to be— oh, a guy in a red shirt!
I just love how the end of this episode reveals that the Wall isn't just some device for Yumulak's growth as a character, it's an entire world. After Tim gets dumped into the Wall, we immediately see the reality of the situation. There are gangs willing to kill so they can pillage anything new shoved into the Wall. Resources are scarce, and the Wall is dangerous. One episode later, we actually get to explore this world, and the world building within the Wall is, like I said before, it's genius. Another of the main Wall characters, Sherry, is introduced and thrown into the Wall, and Tim quickly comes to help her, now a battle-tested Wall survivor.
Come with me if you want to live. That's from Predator.
It's from the Terminator.
I can't get over how effectively they begin to introduce the world within the Wall. Tim immediately explains that the enforcers are a martial police led by the Duke, the leader of the Wall.
It's pretty complicated.
Is he like the Duke of New York from Escape from New York?
Oh, okay, yeah, it's exactly like that. Oh, I forgot about that movie.
But this first real episode set inside the Wall perfectly illustrates the complexities and genius of the world building. The way the Duke seizes resources to maintain control and power. The way the limited resources make certain things as valuable as gold. How the persistent diet of candy might last a while, but the lack of nutrition has severe and negative effects on the people, particularly someone who has diabetes. There are even religions developed that worship Jessie, as she's the one who gifts the wall with resources persistently. And of course, the general aesthetic of this amazing world that's built around discarded junk, all used to build buildings, furniture, tools, etc. It's just such a wildly creative world. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids meets Escape from New York meets Snowpiercer. And this also properly introduces the dangers and stakes of living in the wall, as Pedro tries desperately to get his father some insulin for his diabetes. They start with a piece of Slim Jim, protein being one of the most valuable commodities in the wall. They then try to trade that for a Playboy magazine, which, you know, that makes sense, porn always sells. But when it's refused, Pedro steals the magazine to trade to the Duke anyways, starting a riot. And we later learn that this riot spread to 3 different levels of the wall, causing chaos and revealing how volatile the society within can be. And this also dooms Pedro, who is then punished for causing the riots. God, even just the creativity of using a floss pick as such a brutal weapon is wild. But this episode perfectly establishes what kind of a world the wall is. It hints at the types of creativity we're going to see throughout, and of course creates our 2 main characters' motivations, as Tim and Sherry see the depths of corruption the Duke and his reign bring.
I have to fix this place.
How can one person change the world?
By tearing it down.
So after patiently introducing the concept in the first 2 episodes, this one gives us our first real in-wall story, and shows us just how many possibilities there actually are for this subplot. 2 episodes later, we return to the wall, and see how the newly motivated Tim and Sherry are taking action against the Duke. After stealing info from one of the Duke's higher-ranking officers, the ragtag crew has access to tons of secret locations.
Food caches, secret passages, and he has his own personal 50s diner called Bop Bop.
I love this sort of insurrection storyline, where the hope is to redistribute the Duke's caches of resources to the rest of the wall. I think the other thing I love about this episode is that it's still wildly funny, even within the dramatic serialized wall storyline. This dude insists on sacrificing himself despite not being at all necessary, and when he's hit with this explosion that he easily could have avoided, it has majorly unfortunate effects.
I'm blind and I have no dick!
But the end of the episode reveals that they'd all been duped by the Duke. He set them up so he could take them out. Sherry gets kicked into the boohoo hole, which leads down to the lowermost parts of the wall and is presumed dead, while Tim is arrested and put on the Duke's prison level. This is where the wall plot gets kicked into high gear, with an entire episode of Solar Opposites 100% dedicated to the wall. Even the music just feels bigger and more orchestral. It honestly reminds me of Lord of the Rings. It's an absolutely massive feeling story that takes place over a full 22-minute episode. And fittingly, the stakes are way higher, as they introduce other characters that you quickly grow to love, particularly this guy and his mouse Molly.
Oh, all right, Molly. I'm up. You can't let me sleep in one day?
You see so much more of the day-to-day in this episode, showing the people who thrive and the people who struggle under the Duke's rule. This poor guy barters using mouse milk thanks to Molly, but his new life in the wall is actually something he cherishes.
It's funny to think that I used to be the CEO of AT&T. Back then, I thought money was everything.
I actually really love the way they showcase that not everybody is unhappy in the wall. Here's a guy who farted in an elevator, blamed it on an alien kid, and was shrunk down and put in the wall, and it helped him realize what's actually important in his life. He's living a more fulfilling and happier life with this mouse Molly inside the wall than he ever did as a successful CEO on the outside.
And now I know that it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Ultimately, the wall shows how dire circumstances can truly change a person, sometimes for good and sometimes not so much. Which brings us back to Tim. I love what they do with Tim in this episode. Now, in prison, he learns that his actions were a catalyst for a lot of resistance, and he takes the opportunity to start writing letters about what needs to change in the wall.
So I'm letting go of the world outside the wall and choosing to embrace the world in it. A world we can make better. A world we will make better.
And these letters, after being smuggled out of prison, start to inspire even more freedom fighters to push back against the Duke and his forces, effectively making Tim the de facto leader of the resistance and almost a messianic figure. We also find out that Sherry is alive. She breaks Tim out of prison and unites him with the forces he's destined to lead. And with his newfound influence, he opts to try and unite the lower and mid levels of the wall so they can climb up and overthrow the Duke.
The Duke forgot time that he needs the people more than we need him.
The one problem with this is that the Duke has the high ground, and he's got contingencies for this very scenario. And I can't get over how creative this idea is. The Duke rigs multiple bottles of water so that he can flood the lower levels of the wall in case of an attack, which leads to, without a doubt, the saddest moment in not just the wall, but all of Solar Opposites, as Molly cannot make it out of the lower levels in time.
Molly, no!
This shit is absolutely devastating. I cry every time I watch this. It fucks me up. And on top of that, we then see how many people are killed in the flood by the hands of the Duke, and it is bleak. Eventually, despite the carnage from the flood and countless obstacles in their way, Tim and Sherry do manage to reach the Duke's office and discover the truth. The Duke had a hole to the outside of the house, allowing him to smuggle resources in and out during his reign, and allowing him to escape now. Sherry is ecstatic that they can now help the people escape the wall and try to find a way to get big again, but I think this particular claim is what brought Tim to an important realization.
The resistance, the wall, none of it matters anymore. We have to tell the people.
Even after accomplishing their entire goal, the thought of returning to his old life pushes Tim to make an unexpected decision in one of the strongest twists of the entire show.
The wall is ours. The Duke is dead.
What? We don't know that he's dead.
And once again, life inside the wall has offered somebody a drastically different lifestyle, one that he is unwilling to give up. We don't know much about Tim's life outside of the wall, but inside the wall, he's a warrior, a freedom fighter, a leader, a hero, and basically a messiah. In the wall, Tim is important. And when Sherry told him that none of it mattered anymore, that made him think about all he'd be giving up if he returned to his life outside of the wall. If he returned to just being a regular guy. And Tim was not willing to give up his status and power in the wall.
Some see it as our curse, but I see a gift. We can build a world that's better than the before four.
And once again, Sherry falls to what should be her death into the backyard, ending season 1's wall storyline. And in season 2's second episode, we dive right back into the wall with some funny meta dialogue to lead us in.
It's tired.
Not to me. It's my favorite part of our whole thing. They had an awesome little war in there.
But like I mentioned earlier, the wall is the part of Solar Opposites that changes up the status quo and serializes its world. When we go back into the wall, everything has changed. There's a greeter to meet new people who have been put in the wall, explaining the history of the wall that we saw in season 1, as well as some things we know to be lies.
We have many to thank for their sacrifices, but none more than Sherry, who lost her life slaying the Duke.
Tim has basically made Sherry a martyr, even though he was the one who killed her. And though Tim basically became the new Duke, one thing is undeniable: the state of the wall has seemingly improved significantly, at least at a glance. There's actually plant life growing throughout, new wall folks are immediately asked what they most want to do with their lives, they're given housing, a nutritionist named Steve comes by to divvy out fresh fruit.
Well, I grew them myself from seeds we pulled out of a kind bar.
They just continue to expand the world building in natural and smart ways. And they introduce us to new characters too, the primary character for this season being Hulk Hogan, played by Sterling K. Brown. Hulk is seen as a war hero. During the events of the Battle for the Wall in season 1, Hulk rescued countless people from under an avalanche of nerds, and now he's respected throughout the wall as basically a veteran, even though in the before 4 he was just a writer on Bones. And we even see how the events of the war have affected these people. Hulk has regular PTSD episodes flashing back to the most traumatic moments during the Battle for the Wall. It's really impressive how they're not only brilliantly building the world of the wall, but also evolving the world and its people based on the events of the previous season. But the reveal at the end of this first wall story in season 2 reveals the truth, that beneath this gorgeous, idyllic version of the wall that appears to be utopic is something rotten, as the body of Steve the nutritionist is discovered in a park having been brutally maimed and murdered. And I love this from both a narrative and thematic perspective, because while Tim replaced the Duke, at the core of the wall he kept the same pillars of government in place. He may have tidied up the place and given it a fresh coat of paint, but he didn't fundamentally change the reality, that the people are being lied to in order to keep them under control. And the next Wall episode highlights this really well, as Tim's Waldermen help investigate the murder with the help of Halk because of his experience writing on bones. For this entire storyline, it's clear that the Waldermen are either not good at their jobs or willfully sabotaging Halk's plans. They're doing everything they can to convince Halk that a rogue cricket is responsible, despite the incredibly elaborate display of entrails for each murder victim. To Halk, it's clear that it's a serial killer, and this is the kind of story that I think The Wall instantly makes more interesting. It's such a different type of society, so seeing the way they might have to deal with grisly murders even after it's transformed into this seemingly idyllic world is super interesting. At first, it appears that the Waldermen are just completely inept, at one point murdering a suspect on sight, but it later becomes clear that they're simply trying to derail the investigation so that it can close with a satisfactory conclusion. But despite these attempts, Halk discovers the real culprit, and over the next episode discovers the worst truths about the Wall and his own past. The psychopath who's been murdering innocent Wall citizens actually caused the massive nerd avalanche that turned Halk into a hero. It was his attempt to kill himself and end his murderous impulses, but Halk saved him.
That's when I knew I was special. You saved me so I could fulfill my destiny. I'm a god. Shut up.
I appreciate these kinds of character revelations. Here's a guy who already has PTSD from the War on the Wall. The events of the nerd avalanche haunt him over and over throughout the season, but he was able to hone in on the simple fact that he did the right thing and he saved people's lives. But now he's learned that by saving one of these people, he's doomed others. He saved someone who murdered other people. He created a monster. It's just really good, fascinating personal drama for Halk, a brutal challenge built around his own traumas. And Halk is a character who believes in what the Wall had become. He believes in Tim, and this murderer is now challenging his notions and expectations by making claims that we as the audience know to be true. We know there's a hole in the Wall. We know Tim isn't the great perfect leader he's seen as, but Halk can't accept this easily because he has so many personal stakes embedded in the events of the War for the Wall.
There's no hole in the wall, and I won't let you drag Tim's good name.
This is the episode where we get our first real look at Tim since the events of season 1, and honestly, I think the character work they do is impressive. He's not exactly like the Duke. He doesn't reign with an iron fist and brute force. He's manipulative. He feigns empathy to gain your trust and convince you that what he wants is what you want too, and is what's best for everyone. Tim reveals so much of the truth to Halk, he even shows him the hole. He admits to Halk that he's been a bad leader and didn't change enough about the way it was overseen.
I should have never kept the Duke's enforcers in power. All I did was change their name to the Waldermen.
But he doesn't tell him the entire truth. He lies about Sherry's motivations.
She started talking crazy. She wants to force people out into the backyard to let them get eaten by owls.
And of course, he downplays his own crimes, making it seem like he had no choice.
She fought me. And I killed Sherry. I killed the love of my life to save us all.
And this is really the core of Tim's manipulation. He actually gives Halk the choice to reveal the truth to everyone, or to help him maintain the lie that seemingly allows for peace in the Wall to continue. But he gives him that choice with misinformation about the realities of his own crimes and motivations. He makes Halk think it's the only real choice for prolonged peace, which leads him to become a part of Tim's lies.
We captured the murderer. It was a rogue cricket.
And it's all revealed on the day dedicated to Sherry, who is heralded as a hero for killing the Duke. But this season's big epic Wall episode brings back Sherry in a huge way, and I think adds a ton of fascinating nuance to the character dynamics and relationships. We jump back an entire year and see Sherry's life after the events of the season 1 finale. She survives the fallout of the hole and spends an entire year in the backyard. And this fully feels like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids territory in a great way. It just expands the danger and suspense for these tiny people. Bugs, birds, and possums become massive monsters. A small yard becomes a massive journey. But the most interesting aspect of this episode is how they tie the Duke back in. Sherry and the Duke are now the only two tiny people in the backyard, and they're effectively trapped together in this Alien vs. Predator Requiem ship toy. And over the course of the year they spend together in the yard, surviving and helping each other against the possum, they slowly become actual friends. I found this aspect super interesting, because obviously personal experience goes a long way, and over the course course of this year, the Duke does a lot for Sherry, but she effectively forgets about the Duke's crimes. We saw the man murder countless people in the previous season, and we'll talk more about this in season 3, but she continues to harbor her grudge against Tim, which obviously feels more personal, given that he stabbed her and threw her into the backyard. But I don't think we can say Tim is any worse than the Duke as a leader. We've seen Tim kill people, but we've never seen Tim flood the wall and mass murder people. It's just fascinating to see what people are willing to hold on to or forgive throughout these dire situations. Though the Duke does sacrifice his life to save Sherry in the end, and that is a pretty massive gesture. The other massive revelation is that Sherry is pregnant with Tim's child and has to go through her entire pregnancy inside of the AVP spaceship. This leads Sherry to have to make a really tough decision. Do they make the trek back to the wall, or do they try for the Walgreens over the fence to seek help? Go back to the place you know is dangerous, or take a chance on something completely unknown? After the Duke's sacrifice to help Sherry escape the possum, Sherry has to make this long, perilous journey on her own. I love how massive they make the yard through this and how dangerous nearly everything feels. The sequence where she actually gives birth is so ridiculously suspenseful, but in such a fun way, and also showcases one of the cool moments where the wall story intersects directly with the solar opposites. Sherry is stuck in the Pez dispenser as Jesse eats Pez one by one, getting closer and closer to Sherry herself as she's giving birth. Just such a creative location for this kind of drama and suspense, and it would have been suspenseful without Sherry giving birth. It adds a whole extra layer of suspense. And Sherry ends up needing to make 2 entire journeys because she discovers that the Walgreens was just a billboard. Then she has to return all the way to the wall with her baby Pesley in tow. And she ends up returning to the wall on Sherry Day of all days, just in time to see Halk's cricket speech that we saw a few episodes earlier. This last scene basically merges our season 1 and season 2 wall stories together and sets the stage for season 3, as Sherry and Halk join forces to undermine Tim's regime. I love that this season's big wall episode actually takes place almost entirely outside the wall. It builds up Sherry as a character even more thoroughly than season 1 did, and also humanizes the Duke in a way I didn't expect was possible after his actions in the first season. Now, it doesn't excuse or justify anything he did, of course, but this entire wall subplot through all 3 seasons just does some fascinating character work through the stressful and hard to comprehend events they're put through. These scenarios see good men find power and become corrupt, like Tim. It sees corrupt men lose their power and become selfless, like the Duke. It sees the greedy CEO of AT&T become a humble mouse milk trader, lose the mouse he loves, and then become, well, we'll get to that soon. Season 3 ramps up the Wall storyline in unexpected ways. We do get one episode that focuses almost entirely on the Wall characters once again, but this time it's earlier in the season and features an incredibly subversive storyline. But in the second episode of season 3, they really just get right into the action. Sherry and Halk immediately attempt to sneak up to Tim's office and take him out, and as you might expect, Sherry's grudge is fully personal.
I need to see the look in Tim's eyes when he sees that I'm alive, and I'm exposing him for the fraud he is.
This is once again filled with some absolutely genius writing for the shrunk down world. Tim now uses a Gen 5 Furby as a security system.
Gen 5 Furby. Motion sensors better than the Pentagon's.
And then the fun immediate twist, Tim has gone absolutely mad, hallucinating, detached from reality, all because he's drinking water out of a 1983 Burger King glass that's colored with lead paint. I think Sherry's reaction to this is really interesting. They realize that Tim isn't likely to survive the lead poisoning, which would accomplish their goal, get him out of power. But Sherry isn't satisfied with that. She wants him to be cognizant of his own downfall. She wants him to face justice. But to me, it feels a bit more like revenge. So they actually try to save Tim's life so that he can face a proper punishment.
He looks like he has lead poisoning from some kind of fast food novelty glass.
She's good.
And this leads to one of the most interesting character studies in the entire show, in addition to one of the most brilliant and subversive pieces of storytelling in general. The next episode opens with Tim waking up seemingly healthy again, equipped with a plan to escape the wall while the aliens are all at Hulu land. The entire episode is this massive redemption for Tim as he escapes the wall with Sherry close behind, unshrinks them both, and they attempt to find a way to bring the solar opposites to justice and rescue the wall people. Tim even confesses his deepest feelings of regret and love for Sherry.
My life is richer, happier, and better because you are in it. And while I hate the wall more than anything, I also kind of love it because it gave me you.
The pair of them team up, discover that the aliens have government immunity because they share their technology, and then are forced to just go back to their everyday lives and forget about the wall. They eventually, of course, decide that they have to go back.
We have to go back.
We have to go back!
And manage to overpower the aliens and rescue everyone in the wall. But here's the thing. This entire episode feels off. There are so many aspects of this story that don't track, and other parts that feel contrived. And that's because the end of this episode reveals that this was all Tim's death experience. Tim's desperation to maintain his good name and be a hero bled into his dying thoughts, and he concocted this entire scenario made up of movie cliches and ego-building moments. There are even lines that are pulled directly from movies.
Forget it, Tim. It's Hulu land.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
I mean, the idea that Sherry would forgive Tim so easily after simply confessing his love for her, complete nonsense that could only exist in Tim's head. Sherry doesn't seem concerned about the child she left behind in the wall because Tim doesn't know about the child. Yumulak raving about how much he loved watching Tim's adventures and rise to power in the wall like it was a TV show he was watching. There are so many clever hints that this is just Tim's desperate hopes for redemption as he lay dying of lead poisoning. And the fact that The Wall, the show within the show, is now able to give us subversive episodes that take place entirely within one character's mind is so impressive to me. On paper, it might seem like a waste to spend the precious little time we spend each season on wall plot on something that never actually happened, but the episode is so enjoyable and entertains so many interesting ideas, all while wrapping up Tim's story in a way that is entirely built around his journey as a character. And I think it's the perfect culmination of his story. Over the course of season 1, Tim's rise to a messianic figure made him egocentric, and though I don't think he was deserving of redemption, it did seem like his appearances in season 2 showcased genuine remorse and regret over what he did to Sherry, even if he wasn't willing to accept the consequences. So this fever dream of a resolution for Tim makes so much sense. It's everything he wanted rolled into one. He maintains his heroic visage, literally saves the entire wall from the aliens, shrinks them down and punishes them for what they did to him. He makes amends with Sherry and she forgives him. Everything goes perfectly, like a movie within a show within a show. But of course, it wasn't real, because how could it be? It was just the fleeting desires of a dying man who made horrible, selfish decisions. And I think killing Tim is such an interesting move for the narrative of The Wall in general, especially given how things go from here. Tim wasn't actually known as a bad leader. He was beloved and respected by the residents of The Wall, so usurping his leadership was a risky move.
I wanted him to pay for his crimes, but of course he dodged that, just like he always does.
And it's very clear in the follow-up that this power vacuum is a problem. The church's plan is to put Sherry in the new leadership role, but Sherry knows this would just maintain the same cycle. They even wanted to call her the Duchess, and I think this was a big hint for what was to come. Because the problem here is that they still didn't rid the wall of all of the powers that held up the previous regimes. They were too trusting of the Bohemian Church, who were around for both the Duke and Tim's reigns. They were a vital pillar in upholding that status quo. And Sherry comes along and decides to drastically shake up that status quo by revealing the truth instead of accepting a role as a leader.
There is a hole in the back of the wall.
No, not like this.
So two things are made clear here. Sherry is a different type of leader who wants full transparency with the wall's citizens, and the Bohemian Church does not want that. And even after Sherry shows everyone the hole and reveals the truth, the church tries desperately to spin this into making her the new leader once again. But Sherry refuses. She wants the wall to be democratically governed. She wants people to be able to leave the wall if they want, despite the danger outside. It has to be their decision. She wants to remove the overt control from the leadership of the wall.
Those who choose to stay are going to build a better world. No one person is going to save us. We're going to save each other.
And for the first time, the government of the wall is chosen by the people, with equal representation from all levels. And they're immediately tasked with their first major disaster. The power to the entire wall is cut. Sherry leaves Pesley with the Bohemian Church as she, Halk, and their team head to try and fix the problem in the lower levels. The next few episodes explore the wall in such a fun and new way as the team needs to descend to the lowest levels of the wall, which are now hugely dangerous because of the events of the season 1 flood. And the world building and evolution of the wall is such a highlight here. We meet terrifying sewer-dwelling cannibals, and even more terrifying, the introduction of mosquitoes and mosquito larvae who can drain a tiny human's blood in a single suck. We even see locations from season 1 like the prison level in the Seinfeld set, now dank and disgusting from the flood, and of course, filled with monsters. And I think what I love most about this storyline is though we are cheering for and supporting Sherry as a character, I definitely wasn't sure if she was doing the right thing. They meet the janitor, the very first guy that we saw the kids put into the wall back in season 1, and he's figured out how to harvest the mosquitoes and mosquito larvae for protein. Such a smart concept. But Sherry is so terrified of the dangers that the mosquitoes pose to her child, she isn't willing to go on without trying to kill them all, even if that means eliminating one of the most surefire ways to create a consistent food and protein source for the entire wall that they've ever had. So she and Halk attempt to destroy the mosquito hive. And then we meet back up with the poor mouse milkman, whose name we never really even learned, by the way. And I think this is still one of the saddest journeys in the show, because now after losing Molly, he's been entirely driven by revenge. He created an army of insects and he controls them by blowing through the skull of a dead mosquito. And I think this is really fascinating, because looking at the events of season 1, it felt like Tim and Sherry and the rest of the wall were doing the right thing. They started the war to fight for the marginalized within the mall and bring a more balanced society to everybody. But in doing what they felt was the right thing, people were hurt, including this guy, as he devastatingly lost his mouse Molly. Doing the right thing hurt innocent people and created a new monster for them to have to deal with later, not unlike Hulk had to deal with the serial killer in season 2. The action in this final sequence is wildly cool. Unfortunately, the mouse milk guy bites it pretty hard, and seemingly so does Hulk. That being said, he falls down the boohoo hole fighting the queen mosquito, not unlike Gandalf fighting the Balrog in Lord of the Rings, which makes me think he may survive the fall. Only time will tell, but for now we don't know. And that leaves us with our season 3 cliffhanger, which I alluded to earlier, because the last vestige of the Duke and Tim regimes made a power play while they still had the chance. Sherry returns to see that the Bohemian Church has announced that Paisley is effectively the wall's new messiah.
Our sweet Jessie has gifted us the sweetest candy of all.
And this is, once again, another means of control. The church will use this new baby and assert their will upon the people, using her as their mascot and excuse. And we'll get a third reign after the Duke and Tim that is simply imprisoning the people within this system. But I'm most interested in seeing what this does to Sherry. We've already seen how revenge drives her and has driven her in the past. We've also seen that she would do anything to protect that baby. Part of me is expecting to see Sherry go down a similarly dark path that we've seen all of these other poor souls go down. That the dire circumstances of life in the wall will eventually lead her to do something unforgivable. But after the church branded her child, I don't know if we can blame her. I really think the wall as a setting is one of the most fascinating pieces of world building we've seen on TV. It allows for such a unique brand of dystopian drama with a society so volatile that we're able to see it shift and evolve at the drop of a hat in believable and interesting ways. And the things that the society does to the people is what's most interesting, because despite the wild circumstances, the characters are all incredibly human. They're so well written with fears and insecurities that we can relate to that are then exacerbated by an impossible scenario. And I fully expect that the next season will amp up that drama in amazing new ways. Honestly, my hope is that we see a big time jump so that Paisley is maybe now a small child or teenager who basically acts as royalty within the wall. This would make it wildly difficult for Sherry to get through to her and convince her that she's her mother. I think it could make for some really amazing drama, and regardless of how it pans out, I have a lot of confidence in the wall's storytelling moving forward. The show has been picked up for a 4th season, so we should definitely expect that next summer. I also want to say that I've truly enjoyed Solar Opposites outside of the wall storyline a ton this latest season, especially with some of the world building that they're doing on that side of the show. So let me know if you want to see a video on that in the future as well. But what do you think? Do you like the drama of the wall as much as I do? Do you appreciate the character work and dystopian storytelling? Let me know below in the comments, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.
Johnny! Two Cellos!